Greetings everyone, this is Ahav Ever from the Chronicles of Ahav Ever, and today's video is going to be a short video about why interfaith discussion has no use for Torath Mosheh Jews. So this piece is going to be my personal opinion. I know that other people have different opinions about this, and I perfectly accept that, but in my opinion, it's basically a bad idea for Torath Mosheh Jews to get involved in interfaith dialogues, interfaith discussions, and things like that. Now, the reason why I say this is because essentially, whenever I've seen these things happen, I've even taken part in some of them in the past, it always seems to be a situation where, a person who keeps by the Torah, who holds by Torath Mosheh, has to, in a sense, in some areas, hold their tongue, or either that or accept a tongue lashing from other religions about what their personal feelings are, or their faith decisions are, or ideas are concerning Jews who keep the Torah. Now, when I say this, what I basically mean is that, the problem number one that I have the situation is when these kind of interfaith discussions happen, does everyone have the same goals? What if somebody's there not because of having some kind of discussion? What if they're there for missionary purposes only, to try to convince certain groups of people to accept their faith or to change their position because of some historical issue, but not, for the same goals that everyone else is involved in. So that's something that has to be considered. The second issue is that can everything that's there be be defined as a faith situation? I mean, what if someone doesn't believe in something that's based on faith, but like another group does? How do two people have a discussion when one person's saying, "Well, I believe this," another person says, "Well, I know that this is the case," and the two situations aren't on level ground. The next thing is the point of the conversation about wrongs committed? Or is the discussion happening because one religion believes that the other religion, people from other religion wronged them? Or is there some persecution that's being discussed because of the need to feel better about what happened or to correct a wrong? And that's where I think that the Torah position usually is the one that's kind of been the reception of like, if you will, wrongs committed in a sense, meaning that for the most part, Jews who kept the Torah went around the world and weren't really trying to conquer the lands that we were exiled to. We weren't trying to take over the governments. We weren't trying to convince people to convert to to the Torah. None of those things were happening. But in some areas, there were certain religions that was their goal for the Jewish population, to convince them, convert them, or basically exterminate them if they didn't want to go by that group's teachings. So I personally think that the Torah perspective needs to be completely removed from the equation. And that's just, again, my personal opinion. One of the aspects that make sometimes interfaith dialogue irrelevant is when basically the dialogue is just a bit basically some type of argument. Where, for example, I think I've mentioned several times that I used to be on a forum that I just recently left, where there was, if you will, types of interfaith discussion, but a lot of times it was just argument. A lot of times it was one side, trying to say that the other side was wrong about something and how their position was better. And the question that sometimes comes up is, okay, if the one position is better, what's the point of the argument? For what reason is this argument that even exist? Why even be on a forum if your position is correct? And that's the thing that I'd ask myself. And for example, the forum that I've mentioned before that I was on, the main reason I even got on it at one point was to show that like fellow Jews who were on it, that there was no real reason to argue with some of the people on it about the Torah, about in a sense, if you will, Judaism, about Torath Mosheh. But then, basically one of the things that was also interesting about the forum was that there were times where someone who was maybe like, usually it was somebody who was Christian, would present this something as a question, like, well, why do Jews do this? Why do Jews not do this? And quite often the topic would come up of why Jews don't believe, for example, in Jesus. And a lot of times what would happen is that you'd have someone Christian trying to answer it instead of letting Jews answer it, which virtually every single time that someone Christian would try to answer it, they would get it wrong because, of course, they were not Jewish and they wouldn't know. And so that to me just kind of showed that that level of interfaith dialogue was just completely unnecessary. The other issue too is, as a Jew, for example, if, for example, one of the reasons that some of these dialogues do take place is because of maybe past conflicts between, religions, for example, maybe like wars, maybe conflicts. But in terms of Torath Mosheh, for example, there hasn't really been a situation where, I would even say in recent history, even in, mostly past history, that a current group of people can make a claim that, Torath Mosheh Jews came in and, like, for example, um, you know,
dispersed them, came in and, like, for example, persecuted them, tried to take over territory, fought wars over religion. Pretty much one of the claims that some people make against, the Jewish position, if you will, in modern times is mainly like as if there's a conflict between, Jews and like Palestinians or something like that. But that's not a Torath Mosheh conflict. That's more of a political conflict, because, for example, most of the leadership of like the Palestinians, are not really religious Muslims, just like, most of the leadership of the Israeli government, for example, are not religious Jews, and both countries are not really founded on, as a nation, for example, the principles of the so-called religions that they follow, if you will. Um, so basically that's one of the reasons is like, okay, now, it's not, because of conflict. That's such a dialogue we need to have in terms of, like, let's say Torah Moshe Jews and Christians. Well, what would be the reason there? I mean, there's nothing there that, like Torah Moshe Jews knew to apologize for persecuting Christians. That's not something that's ever happened. Um, one of the things I have found is that there are certain types of Christians who feel persecuted, and sometimes they feel persecuted for, the ones I've seen. This is not an overall statement for all Christians, but there's certain types of Christians who almost feel persecuted for people when people don't believe what they believe. So for example, if they present their religion, um, especially in the context of, like the missionary stance, for example, someone shows up and tries to convince someone that, like, of Jesus in one format or the other, someone doesn't believe it, and there's almost like this type of offense that comes about, where they feel like they're being persecuted for someone not believing in what they're trying to promote. And that's the experience I've had with certain types of it. And then, which means that if their idea is a missionary type of idea, well, there's no reason for the dialogue. That means that there's some other reason the dialogue is taking place, and not because of some, reason beyond, the person trying to convince someone to believe in their type of Christianity, if you will. And this is not, again, an overall statement towards all Christians, because there's a lot of Christians who are not missionary in their agenda, or their goals. There's also some Christians who also maybe feel the same way about dialogue, where it's like, if they believe that they're right, then what's the point of the dialogue? So, and then there's some, religions where they feel that they're right, and they feel like they have to promote that amongst other people, which would require them to have to prove why they're right. And that's one of the things there. And that's why I say that sometimes the dialogue is just completely unnecessary when someone's there to try to say, well, you're wrong and I'm right. I'm going to convince you that I'm right. But, in some cases I've been in interfaith dialogues, for example, where, um, it's not really a faith issue, because again, Torath Moshe requires, us to hold by what the truth is and have proof behind what we hold by. And even if someone doesn't accept, our version of proofs, because every individual has their own level of what they consider to be true and what they consider to be proof of something to be true. If someone can't even prove it based upon their own logic, or even someone else, someone else's logic, then the discussion is pointless, especially when the person wants to focus only on that aspect. Now, one of the things I will say is I'm not against like interpersonal discussion, for example. Interpersonal discussion to me is one of those things where people can have a discussion about any situation, but it's not focused on religion per se, if you will, or certain aspects of what people consider to be the truth. It's more like saying, look, we live in a certain area, we work together, and there's no reason for us to battle about certain things, or to have conflicts, or just to simply promote the need to interact with each other, or the need to coexist in situations where we need to coexist. That kind of discussion is a different type of discussion, because the focus is not trying to missionize a particular idea, or religious belief or something like that. Mostly that would be just something where, okay, we need to coexist because we exist in this space. We live on the same planet. So for that, interpersonal discussion is one thing, but it's not interfaith dialogue, if you will. So the main reason, again, that there would be no real reason in Torath Moshe to have an interfaith dialogue is because Torath Moshe is founded upon something that's, in many cases, in a different area than what we would call religion or faith nowadays. For example, as I've mentioned in other videos, Torath Moshe is all ancient, authoritative, and authentic historical texts, concepts, judicial rulings, practice, and traditions that trace directly back to the singularity of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, as it was transmitted from Hashem to Moshe ben Amram and all of Am Yisrael, and has been preserved by the descendants who are from the most ancient communities of Mizrahi, Taimani, Sephardi, um, Maghrebi, and Ashkenazi Jews. So that being the reality of Torath Mosheh, then there isn't any real need to dialogue in terms of, if you will, someone else's beliefs, someone else's concepts. It's just a matter of, okay, if it's interpersonal, we can just simply learn how to coexist amongst each other. But there's no reason for me to try to, push someone in a certain direction, and there's no reason for them to try to push me in another direction in terms of what most people would designate as religion, for example. So in summary, basically, my beliefs about the whole interfaith dialogue is just simply that a lot of it, isn't really relevant or necessary to someone who holds by Torath Moshe. And that, again, if it's just simply, interpersonal discussion because of the fact that two, groups of people coexist and that they have to make sure that they can exist, then that's perfectly fine. But to simply go through and, have these debates and discussions, just simply, and especially I would say it's true when, for example, the debate is about a text that's written in one language, but the debate takes place in a different language, for example. So that'd be like someone arguing about what an English translation says when the original text is written in Hebrew. That just doesn't go anywhere because each person walks into it with their own idea of what the English means rather than what the Hebrew means. And I'll probably have to do a video where I focus in on that at some point. But again, this is Ehav Ever from the Chronicles of Ehav Ever, and I thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.